Let's get this started. Well, hello everyone. This is Daniel Hanzelka, and I'm in a conversation today with Ron. Introduce yourself, Ron.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ronald Tabachnik.
And we're going to have a conversation where we're going to just ponder some questions and just try to figure out how we can solve some of these things, not only in our lives, but how we can share some of the information and experiences. Ron just calculated we've got over 115 years of experience between us. And I think it's just going to be awesome if we can just share with you some of our thoughts and things that we have. And just to share with you a little bit, this is the second time we're doing this conversation. The first time technology got the better of us and we were not able to record it the way that we wanted. So we just again want to share with you, our listeners, to some of our thoughts. And Ron, why don't you just kind of introduce the question that we're going to ponder on today, and we're going to converse and we're going to share with our listeners.
Daniel, I have been thinking about what would be a valuable conversation. And then I was interested in finding what the question is. And I just heard a very interesting description of the Kybalion, which is a documentation of 7 Hermetic principles that were developed many, many years ago. And the reason why that came to my mind is that the last one that this presenter, Mark Passio, brought up was the idea of what do we really care about? And what I would like to explore with you this morning in our first conversation is what people really care about. And I've noticed that I've taken that for granted, that whole aspect of caring. And if you were to ask me, what do I really care about? I have to stop and think. And to be honest with everybody, I don't care about too much.
I think, as you mentioned, I think there is a distinction. There is what we really care about, and then there is what we think we care about.
Yes.
And often we get wrapped up in what we think we care about, what we care about. But, my view is we only know what we care about by the results. So if someone says, I want to make more money, or I want to have, better financial situation, and we look at the results, and I do a lot of coaching with clients, and this is kind of my personal experience also, is that we say these things, well, we want more money. Well, first of all, how descriptive that is. I've heard one of the coaches say, you want more money? Here's a quota, you have more money, so there's no more issues, you don't have any more problems, right? But there is also another part of it where we said we want more money, but then we look at what we're actually doing on a daily basis and what are some of the habits and things that we're doing. And, my view is that we're doing everything but wanting to make more money, right? Because by our actions, and often when I'm coaching individuals, when they say, well, I like to have more sales, I want to have more money. Well, in order to have that, there are certain actions you have to do. And unfortunately, most people would rather sit in their office and not talk to people, right? And open up the conversations and start having, the money-making activities, which is speaking with people, and they would rather sit at home and not call anybody and just hoping that somehow somebody's going to find out about them and call them out of the blue and say, hey, I'll pay you $10,000 for your coaching, which I haven't had that happen to me yet, but, I'm sure there probably is, but I think most people think, well, somehow people will just find me without really doing any of the work.
But also, that if someone called me today to do a planning session, which I love to do, I would be there without hesitation, without concerns, qualms, no negatives. I just would be there if someone called me. And that's why I like your idea of helping people create leads for themselves, because they don't have to get on the phone and proselytize themselves in front of other people to sell their services.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, again, a lot of these things in the conversation that we're having, it's all about mindset, right? So, even right there, just think about what you just said, right? Listen, sales is all about giving. Yet we feel like when when we were taught, we have this kind of skewed perception of what sales really is, and we feel like sales is all about taking, right? If you have a service and you're helping somebody and they have a need for that, all you need to do is just to have a conversation, right? So I mean, my view is you can't have a sale without a conversation. So you're still going to have to get on the phone and have a conversation. Where the difference is the mindset that you're going to have around it, right? And when you change your thinking and you feel like, hey, listen, I'm just having a conversation with someone, there is no pressure, you know, we're just going to talk, that takes a lot of the pressure off. I think what you're saying is if you feel like, well, I have to let people know what I'm doing, it creates a layer of, well, I don't really want to be doing that, I'd rather be doing everything but that, right? And this is where we kind of start to lie to ourselves, and we start to rationalize, well, I'll just go and work in my office and somehow somebody's going to phone me. No, we actually do have to go out there and share with people what we're doing, but we kind of have this skewed view of what sales really is, and and what we need to do. And as we have shared even yesterday when we were chatting to prepare for this call, I think there is what we think we're wanting, and there is really what we're doing, and there is a huge difference between that. Even when it comes down to when I ask somebody what they want, and they tell me, I know exactly what I want, and I say, okay, well, define it for me, like tell me what it is. And people suddenly stop because now they're becoming conscious about what it is that they want. And there is a huge difference because it feels like in their heads they're thinking, I know exactly what I want, but there is a disconnect between what they think and what they imagine in their head and then actually verbally saying it. Because when we take words from the unseen world, when we take what we think we want and we start speaking it, there is a difference because we've taken something from the unseen and now making it seen. And as soon as we start speaking about it, it it looks different, it feels different, it's not the same thing as when we're just thinking about it. And I
And
think
also
this
at the same time, what I'm noticing within myself is even though I would tell you what I want, I'm getting a sense that two things. One, I may not really care what I really want. And also, I may not be willing to do what it's going to take to get what I want.
and that's where the disconnect is, right? We think, well, I want all of this, I want to make more money. And I hear it all the time from some of my coaches. They said, you know what, people come to me all the time and says, oh man, you're so lucky that you have all of this stuff, you're making all of this money. And one of my coaches says, luck has nothing to do with it. You have no clue what I had to do, right? You have no clue what here, let me turn off this phone. You have no clue what I had to endure. The fact that I have gone almost bankrupt, almost got a divorce, all of these things that have happened, I had to work for what I have. It didn't just happen on its own. And on my email, often I have a tagline that I say, success does not happen by an accident. And there is a huge difference of what we think we might have to do and what we actually do have to do. And as you mentioned, there's a huge disconnect because often things that we think we want are not really what we want, because in order for us to get those things, we might actually have to, as you mentioned, get on the phone, make the phone calls, be rejected by people, be told people, you know what, get lost, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want anything that you have to share with me, right?
Well, the two things that come up. One is, what do I really want? What do I really want? And number one, and number two is, as I mentioned yesterday, sometimes I feel like a kid. And I'm noticing now it's this idea of growing up, being an adult, being responsible. And I don't think that I've really been honest about growing up and also really deciding on what do I really want? Do I care about it? Am I going to do something about it?
uh, this is why I love having these conversations. There's tons of things that come to my mind when you're saying, I mean, just even the whole thing that you feel like you're a child, like you're a kid. Listen, one of my you've asked two favorite questions that are probably the most difficult to ask and to answer is, what do I really want? And this is a question that, listen, I've been pondering for years, because I think I know exactly what it is. When I try to define it, it's as if my brain just turns to jello and I have no clue, because that actually means if I go and say what I want, it means that I'm actually defining it. And often for me personally, I feel like I don't want to. I think I do, but I don't. So there's this dilemma. And then the other thing is I love asking this question other men. And, the question is let me ask you, Ron, when do you feel you became a man? Or when do you think you became a man?
Can we go outside and discuss this physically?
Listen, for me, I'm 43 years old. Now we're giving about our ages here, but I'm 43. Yet, there's a question I have asked. Somebody in their 80s, 60s. I said, okay, when did you become a man? And often, other men pause and they're like, "Oh, I really don't know," because we don't have in our society here. We don't, in North America, where we both are, we have this. We don't have a passage, right? There are societies that they do have a rite of passage for when somebody is a boy and they become a man. For me, often I feel like, like I said, I'm 43. I mean, listen, I know I'm a man, but often when I'm making decisions and I'm going through life, it feels like I'm just this, 8 or 9 year old child stuck in this body and I have no clue what to do. Yet I'm expected to behave in a certain way where most of the time I've got no clue.
Yes.
I have an 18-year-old daughter, and I'm like going, I still feel like I'm an 8-year-old kid. How can I have an 18-year-old daughter? So like physically, there's a huge difference between physically, I know I'm a man, right? I mean, look in the mirror, whatever. Don't have to paint the picture for that. I know I'm a man, and I know I've been alive for 43 years. Yet on the inside, often I feel like I'm just a little kid trying to figure out life, right? Like
Yes.
one of my coaches, he was in an argument with his wife, and his wife looked at him and said, and I'm not going to use names here, but it says, Joe, why don't you just be a man? And he looked at her and said, you know what, I'd love to, but I have no idea how. And he said that was the first time he realized that we live in this world where we're expected to do certain things and behave certain way, but we really didn't have the training, and we never really stop and ask, what is the definition of that? So
Never.
he looks at his wife and says, okay, you're asking me to be a man. I have no clue what that is. Can you tell me what it is and I'll do it? And she looks at him going, well, I have no clue. Like, aren't you supposed to know? And he's like going, yeah, well, I'm supposed to know, but I have no clue. And he said that was the first time that he realized that we have this social agreement that we as men supposed to know what it is to be a man, that once you have children, you're supposed to know what it is to be like a father. And what I've discovered is that, all the training, like even for me, that I've received about being a father came from my past and my history and what I've seen. And listen, my parents divorced when I was 9 years old. So my example of a father is you check out on life, right? You leave. And that was, that's from my experience, that's what it's supposed to be. Well, when I was, fairly young, I made the decision, okay, I'm not going to do the same thing that happened in my family. I'm not going to go get divorced. And I'll have to say that I've co-created that life with my queen, with my wife, and we've been married for over 20 years. And I tell people the reason I am married for over 20 years is because my parents divorced. Yeah, I'll tell you this, I have the same saying. Unfortunately, my sister has gone through a divorce, and I say, well, the reason my sister has divorced is because our parents divorced, right? So we have the same experience, but there were different decisions and choices that were made as far as what the end result is. And I feel like I'm becoming conscious. I'm like going on a tangent here, so we got to bring it back to the question. And I'm not sure what point I was trying to make at this point. I kind of got lost in my own conversation. But
Have you noticed that we get very lost in our own conversations?
well, you know what, and where what's coming about becoming a man and all of this stuff, and we even from that perspective, how we're feeling and where we're going, and to answer your questions, yes, I love to talk, and I get lost because there is just started at one point. We start here, and then we keep on growing from from there. And I think this is why these conversations are going to be interesting for our listeners. And we can probably spend hours and hours speaking on the phone. Me and you do have that history of doing that for several hours, 3-4 hours sometimes, and discussing. And it's interesting. At the same time, I think all of these ideas that we have, and again, we're part of this conversation started, is when do I feel like I became a man and all of this stuff. We really have no clue how to live our life, right? We just have these assumptions that we're supposed to somehow figure things out. Most of the time, we're not even conscious about what we're saying, and what everybody just experienced. Me actually speaking, getting involved in a conversation, not sharing a lot of great information, but really losing, and I'll put it this way, losing consciousness, where I got lost in my own conversation. And there was a moment where I just became conscious of what I'm doing, and I realized I'm lost, right? I'm in a conversation where I'm speaking and I'm saying words, but I have really no idea why am I even saying, and what am I knew what I was saying, but I didn't know why, because I lost the beginning of the conversation and the question that we asked.
And what I find interesting is like a broken telephone. Between our conversation, we start with one conversation, we end up with another, and we think, well, that wasn't the first conversation.
Yeah, and we never go back to what we originally spoke about.
Well,
right?
We will go back, but the thing that I'm thinking of is that we're going to give our listeners a plethora of places where they could participate in their minds, how they want to chat with us and what they want to share.
Yeah, and we can tackle some of these, some of these questions that they may have, 100%.
Or we find out where their head is at and how we have a conversation including them. And for every person that joins on, we're going to have another 70 years of experience. We may have 1 million years of experience to share with everybody. Could be very powerful.
Yeah, 100%. I think the whole purpose for all of this, and we touched on it a little bit, is how much of our time we actually believe we are conscious and mindful of what we're doing and saying and where we are at. And that's, I think, the whole topic about questions. Often asking questions bring us to that point where we start saying, hey, what is going on, right? Am I really being conscious about what I'm doing and where I'm at? And even I know for me and from my experience and my view on this is, for years I've been wanted to be more conscious in what I'm doing and becoming a lot more focused as far as what I'm doing. Yet even here on this conversation I just shared, that I just became unconscious. Even though I'm speaking and I look like, hey, I'm all there, my mind took me down a road where I completely lost sense of time, what even the topic was, where things were, and I just kept on talking and moving the conversation in a direction. So I think for me, is being conscious and being mindful is an art form, something that somebody has to work on and practice more, because I have a lot of practice being unconscious. Now we got to practice being more mindful and more conscious.
And that's why about 25 years ago, I decided to ask myself, why am I saying anything? And I brought that up because I believe that when I open my mouth, I'm getting attention. And I'm getting someone to listen to me. I'm getting someone to acknowledge me. I'm getting someone to say, I love you. And I feel that this was triggered back when we were babies. I can't prove it, but I get a sense when I think about why I'm even saying anything now, I'm getting a gentleman out there who's listening to me, who's paying attention to me, because I got a sense that I never got the attention or the acknowledgement that I needed in the crib. And I've noticed that when I listen to people, I'm finding out, I think that we're all in the same crib, wanting attention. And yesterday I was talking to a multimillionaire in a meeting with him. And he was talking and talking and talking and talking. And I remember saying to myself, well, what about me? And I noticed is that when I'm talking, I get your attention. But when you're talking, I have to give you my attention. And if I don't care about you, I can't even hear you. So, and if I care about you, I find out that I can learn about what you're talking about, learning from your perspective to add to mine. I'm going, that's communication.
But I think what you're mentioning there, most people are not listening. They're just, or they're already are putting together the question they're going to ask.
No, you're not right.
Yeah.
I have found that it's so difficult to really listen unless I love you. When I love you, I have all the capacity to listen to whatever's going on with you. But if I have an issue with your beard, if I have an issue with your nationality, I found out that that stops me from really being in present with you.
So let me ask you this. You brought an interesting point because I'm not quite sure if I agree with that statement, because do you always listen to everything that your family members are saying? Because I presume that you love your family members. Uh, do you listen to everything they're saying and you're 100% paying attention to that?
No,
So I think that theory that you pay attention to someone that you love might be going out the window there a little bit, Ron.
no, because some of my family members I don't love.
Okay, so with the ones that
Even though they're family members, I found out I don't really love them because some of the family members that I really do love, it doesn't matter. It just everything disappears other than just this momentary connection with them, which to me is magical.
yeah, okay.
Like right now, there's one moment of connecting with you, everything disappeared. I said, well, that's what I love, making that connection with you.
Oh, so are you telling me you love me, Ron?
Uh,
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but this goes back to the conversation we had last week. So let's not get lost in that. But I think part of it is just becoming conscious. And the reason I'm saying that, I mean, I agree with you that if we do care for someone, we will be more uh, we will be more conscious about the fact that we want to listen to them. But I'm reflecting on some of the conversations with my wife, and I mean, listen, I love her dearly, but I see myself often in conversations where I have to say that it's more about competing about, I want to prove that I'm right and I want
oh,
her to listen
yes.
to my
Oh,
point, where in those moments I feel like that maybe I don't care for her as much that I say I do, because it's more about me winning and you know, an argument or a conversation than really caring for, you know, what she has to say. And it's, I think the point, and again, we can have a long conversations on this, and I'm sure we're not the first ones that have pondered this, is where did all of this started? And I think, you know, us, listen, what you're mentioning about, you know, starting in a crib and all this, and I've heard it of many parents say, and this was my kind of view when I had my children, that whenever they were trying to get our attention, they would be doing something, or they were not maybe listening to us. People would look at it, and what I've heard people would tell me, well, they're just trying to get your attention. They're trying to be in power. They're trying to, you know, like control you because they're crying. Listen, when, you know, when you were a child, you know, your needs were fairly basic. It was like, you know, give me food, change my diaper. You know, it wasn't like, you know, they were vying for, you know, my children, they were vying for my attention, like, because they're like going, okay, I'm going to manipulate my parents. I'm going to get them to do exactly what I want. Right? I mean, listen, when you were in a crib, you couldn't walk, you couldn't talk, you couldn't do anything for yourself. You did need your parent to take care of you, right? And I think what sometimes may happen from an, you know, from that perspective is that it might be viewed as that child is really needy, right? And they might be start using and manipulating their parents to get the parents do whatever they want. Right? But my view is well, when we became as a children, we couldn't go and take care of ourselves. I think the issue more becomes, it's not the child manipulating, and this is just the thought I've had right now. Maybe it's the parent trying to manipulate the child of saying, hey, I'm on my own. I had to get through this life. Now it's your turn, and I'm not going to do anything for you, right? And then the child feels like, no, hang on, you're my parent. You're supposed to take care of me, right? And now it's the child and the parent that are competing for attention, and who's going to get more attention, right?
yeah. And also, I understand that when you have a child, and you know this better than I do because I don't have children, the first few years of your life, You don't have a life, I understand. It's all about your child.
Yeah, but whose decision was that, right? It was our decision, yet we were holding it against our children, going, "Come on, you're a child. You're not supposed to act like this." Right? And I think that never really stops, right? I mean,
No, that never stops.
yeah,
And that's why I get a sense what's really going on, and I can't prove it because I don't know what this word being conscious really means, but it seems as if that our whole human experience is to wake up. What that means is I don't know. At the same time, what I noticed was we forgot our basic needs.
I think what along those lines, what's coming to my mind as you mentioned that is that we've got to realize that the world doesn't revolve around us, that there is something more on the outside of us, and I
And at the
think,
same time, the world does rotate around
well,
us.
of course, because we there are certain things that we want and we want to get, and it really doesn't matter if you tell me that I shouldn't have them. If I want them, your opinion doesn't really matter, right? Because it's what I want.
That's another thing. Your opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So not sometimes I grew up, my opinion didn't matter.
Yeah.
So what do I do now? I become outrageous. So I get people to say, "Oh, okay. Oh, I recognize you. Your opinion does matter." And then once in a while, when someone says your opinion matters, I go, "Who, me?
And we're not used to
Do
it as
I
we
really
grow up.
matter?"
Yeah. So, and you know what, when you start looking around, and I think our listeners can start thinking about when they look other people that are around them, and people manifest this in different ways. Listen, I've had serious conversations with individuals that, because they feel like they don't matter, they enter into a state where they want to check out of life. They don't want to be here anymore, right? They don't want to. And it's like, no, hang on. My view is that we all matter. There is a reason and purpose why we were created, why we are here on earth. Unfortunately, because of our experiences, we feel like that maybe our opinion doesn't matter. Some individuals feel like, that's it. My parents don't really care about me. I think at the core of all of this stuff is because, if somebody feels like they don't matter, you know what? It's just an opinion. It's a view that maybe they have heard from someone else, or it's an opinion or a view that they have grown into, and they start believing that. I think, and the reason for us having these conversations and talking about this is just becoming more conscious of the fact that just because we have certain thoughts or feelings or perspectives doesn't really mean that that is the reality that's happening.
And at the same time, what I want to keep in mind, where I'll put on my computer, you matter.
Yeah. And it's
everybody that I'm talking to everybody I'm talking to, I want to remember to myself, hey, you matter.
Yeah. And it's interesting as you say that, if I said, Ron, you matter, there is a certain reaction that's happening on the inside. And there is a part of, if when you say that, you matter, and I say, okay, well, yeah, I do. There's part of me that agrees with that. And there is like this part of me that wants to disagree with it, yet I have no idea why. And there is this rejection of that whole idea. There is this whole pushback, and it's kind of creates this conflict on the inside, because one part of me says, yeah, of course I matter. And as I mentioned, there is this other part that wants to almost reject that. And I think this all goes back to how we were growing up, as as you've mentioned, of going back to when we were children, when we were in the crib, or we were rejected by our parents or accepted by our parents. And again, my view and what I've learned is, because of my parents separating, it has affected me quite greatly, and it is still affecting me to this point, how I behave and what I do. And resolving that has become kind of a big part of it. But part of the resolution for me has become to just saying, you know what, my parents did the best that they could with what they had. That's it. And you kind of have to let go of that stuff, because if I want to go and have a conversation with my parents, they don't want to deal with it. Right. And again, that's their choice. And for years, I wanted to make them deal with it. And often, even now, when I get into conversations, because it's like, I want to resolve it, but I came to realize that, what, there might not be a way how to resolve it, and I kind of have to let go of it. So part of, as we ponder these questions and going through this, is just saying, you know what, there may be some questions and some views that we may not be able to resolve, and we just got to let go, and we have to be comfortable with that.
Yes.
And I think that's an art form, because so often, even when we're having conversations and with people that we love, or people that we come in contact with, it's not about being right. It's just, hey, I'm going to state my opinion. I'm going to share what my beliefs is, and it's okay if you don't agree with me, and it's okay if you don't support me in what you have to be there. And we've got to be comfortable and okay with that, because what I find often, when somebody doesn't agree with me, I want to make them agree with me no matter what, because I'm right and I don't care what you have to say. And again, it's like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about being able to share and realize that we both can experience the same event, but how we going to view it and what we're going to take away from it may be at complete opposite ends. And that's why I say the reason I'm not divorced is because my parents divorced, and the reason my sister is divorced because our parents divorced. It almost doesn't make sense, but there are two individuals that have gone through the same experience, yet they're creating a different experience today because of that experience in the past. And it doesn't
Well,
make
two
one.
things. One, the only things I want to share with you, what comes up for me is this is your story.
Yeah.
This is your interpretation. You can't prove it to me
Yeah.
what happened. And I've noticed is, okay, this is my story. I bet my brother has a different story. Well, one second. How can we have three stories about the same relationship? So maybe there's something I should take into consideration. And what story would I really want to hear?
Yeah.
And I'm noticing now, as you said, I'm thinking, what is the story that I really would like to hear about that relationship? Because maybe someone is telling that story.
Well,
And
it's
I'm not making the story a negative or a positive. I'm noticing that there may be a positive in that story because that is my history, and not to really look at it as a negative, or because you may find out. What I was thinking is, what happens if you realize in a parallel reality your parents are still married together and you're still the same person today? I'm going, uh-oh, what happened to that story?
you bring a very good point, and but you just open up a whole. My mind's just like going, wow, that's an interesting. Maybe you should write that down, and we'll discuss that at some point. I think what it comes down to, and we got to be thinking about wrapping up. We wanted to keep this to about half an hour. I think we're over already, but I think from the one perspective, what you're mentioning is that we need to realize that our story is our story, and everybody has their own story. And
About the same event.
yeah, and the point is not that our stories has to be exactly the same, because we all have a different view or a different perspective, and we need to become accepting of that. That just because, and one of my coaches put it this way, he said, listen, if you were walking through a theater, okay, and in each of those theaters you notice that there is a movie playing, a movie that you have seen before, uh, but it looks a little bit different, and you walk into a theater and maybe there is your parents that are sitting there, and you notice this person sitting there, and you realize that it's your mother or your father or sister or brother, and you're looking at the screen, and you're like going, hey, oh, I remember that. I remember when I had that conversation with my mother that's being played on the screen, but suddenly what you're hearing is completely different as you remember that conversation. And you're sitting there going, no, 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 that's not what I said. And what you realize is what you're seeing is the movie or the situation that was played from your mother's perspective. And you're like going, I mean, I remember saying something like that, but I didn't mean to say those mean things to you, mom. Like, that wasn't me. And you want to start screaming, stop the movie, stop the movie. That's not what happened, right? But you realize that you have no effect because it's the movie's playing. Your mother doesn't really know you're there, but it's the movie that's playing in your mother's mind. And you need to become more aware of the fact that just because you said it things in a certain way is not the way that another person hears it.
Yes.
And then often I find myself would be, and if I use that was me looking at my mother, I find myself in a conversation with my mother trying to convince her that that's not how things went down. And I find out that for me, one of the things, and might as well, as we're sharing this, I'll make this public. One of my way of getting attention from someone when I'm speaking with them and I feel like they're not listening to me, I start raising my voice. And it starts slowly until I start yelling at people. And I'm not even conscious that I'm doing that. But that's my way of getting somebody's attention. And this is a learned thing that I've learned with my mother. And even, when I have a conversation today, and I've had this conversation last week, my family thinks that I'm having a huge fighting match with my mother on the phone. And really all I'm doing is I'm just trying to get her attention. It has nothing to do that I'm upset, that I'm angry. I just want to get her attention. But now I start, speaking louder. And as I mentioned, I'm almost screaming at her, trying to get her attention. And it's not working because the louder I scream doesn't necessarily get her attention. But I find myself kind of in this repetitive view of how things were. So we need to become mindful that just because we had the same experience, what we're taking away from that conversation or wherever we were is not what the other person is having.
Yes. And this other thing that I've noticed for myself is this whole thing about getting attention.
Yeah.
What is it about getting attention? And I'm noticing that there's a wonderful thing going on in my mind considering what that really means.
Yeah.
A lot of people like us have certain questions we ask. Other people won't even consider asking it. But I've noticed that when I ask myself over and over again, what's this thing about getting attention? There's something magical that happens that I seek.
Yeah. No.
And 100%. I've noticed also that if I talk too much, I become aware of, okay, you got the attention. What now? And the other thing that I want to make you very aware of is I found out in my whole sales career, it felt like taking. Even today, when I'm talking to somebody about presenting what I want to share with them that has value, I'm noticing I'm still playing that old record. It feels like taking.
Yeah.
The words are sharing, but I'm not there congruently.
Yeah, and you know what? You just brought this conversation to the beginning when you said, and I can't remember the word that you said. Oh, that you proselytizing yourself. That's the taking part on there. And listen, maybe you know what? Let's have another discussion where we talk about that topic about sales and helping other individuals. And we did have a quite interesting conversation yesterday that we went on that topic when it comes down to us being in that sales conversation and us sharing with others what it is that we're offering and not being attached to that feeling like you're taking something from someone. Because my view, what I've learned, and again, it's something that I've had to learn from my coaches that I've had, is that sales is about giving. It's not about taking. Because what we're actually is something that we're giving, yet we feel like when we want to explain how we can help somebody, we feel like we're actually taking something from them. And the whole conversation about getting paid for what we're doing, it's a whole nother it's a whole nother long conversation that we can have, and which is all part of it. Because if we're providing a service, we should go and get paid for it, but it feels very unnatural for us to do that, right? So you know what? I think we got to wrap this up. It certainly has been an interesting conversation as we're going to have, and we want to share this with listeners. We're going to be doing this on ongoing basis, and we want to make this a place where, yes, people can start interacting with us, and we'll figure out with technology how that's going to work. But listen, let's see if this recording is going to record the way that we want it. This is take number 2, and we'll go where we'll see where we'll take this from here, and we'll set up these videos on YouTube, and then we'll share it with our network, and we'll see how people are interested in and what they want to talk about.
And in Hebrew, there's a word called basheret, which is a play on, in English, is a play on the word sharing, but basheret is whatever's meant to be.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about sharing this first conversation with the universe and find out what we can manifest.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this is Daniel Hanzelka and Ron Tabachnik signing off, and we'll see you again. We're going to try to do this on a weekly basis. Maybe we'll start doing it more often. We'll figure out how to go and share this.
Weekly. Give me a chance. This weekly.
Just weekly. All right. So we'll see. This is again things that we have put together, and we just want to share our knowledge and our thoughts with our listeners. So
same time, same station.
Yeah, we'll chat next week. All right.